All right, are you ready for the next lesson? If you have some supplies, have your notebook open, have a couple color pencils. I'm thinking you probably need red, blue, and then a black or blue pen would be great. So let's go ahead and get started. So you've been doing a little bit of reading on the war in Korea and the war in Vietnam, two major wars that happened in Asia that come up on the test. So go ahead and put our title down. So just follow along as you see me taking the notes, just like we normally do during school time.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a very simple map. This is going to be, not drawn to scale of course, the map of the Korean Peninsula. Up here in the north, I'm going to label this region because this is China. Notice how I used red to indicate again, they are communist. Another country that's really important that we want to put over here is just directly south is this island nation. It's kind of a little hard to see on the screen, but this will be Japan. All right, so let's back up a little bit. So during World War II, big things happen. All right.
Glenn.
First, some things to remember during World War II, looking at these two places. We want to remember that Japan was aggressive, totalitarian, looking to build an empire. And Korea was one of those places. Okay, well, let's just make another note, just as a reminder, in case we forgot. They wanted an empire, Japan. When the war ended, who was the winner and who was the loser? Japan lost. So what happens next? Well, peace talks are going on. What's going to happen with Japan? As you already know, the United States is going to come in and occupy Japan. Well, by this point now, the Soviet Union kind of gets involved, and they're starting to persuade some of the people here in Korea, maybe some of the people should become communists like them. That's a great idea. And of course, the people in the South are trying to be persuaded by the United States, close to Japan, hey, maybe you should be democratic. Well, what ends up happening is they can't really decide what's going to happen in this peace treaty, because what should they do with Korea? Japan controls them right now, so what's going to happen? They've decided they're going to divide the country in half. This is at the 38th parallel. So it's kind of a divider. Well, what's going to end up happening, as you can imagine, guess who's going to influence the North? I think you can see in the North, it's going to become communist. And in the South, guess what it will be? You guessed it. Democratic. So color it in with your blue because we like blue for freedom. Okay. All right, so now what happens next? This is where it gets a little interesting. So first, of course, you know, if you look at this country, it looks like they're very divided. They have different ideologies, different ways of seeing the world. What type of government should they have? But essentially, they're still all Korean people. So technically, what's going to happen next is going to be what we call a civil war. Both sides, of course, wishing the other side would join their side. Well, number one. And this is the very simplified version, okay? The very simplified version. So what happens number one? Number one is, you see this inside, the North attacks. Next, you remember this new organization was formed called the United Nations. The United Nations said this time we for sure promise that we are going to help if any nation becomes aggressive. And if any nation is aggressive and becomes a bully country, those nations who signed up to be part of the United Nations will step in and help. Okay, so the North attacks first. So technically they are an aggressor country. So what should the United Nations do? Well, they must help. So, number two. The UN troops arrive. Although there's an interesting fact. Of these UN troops, guess what? Most are Democratic, and most are from the United States. So then what happens? As the UN troops keep moving north, you can only imagine, as they get a little bit closer, which country might start to feel threatened? Yep, you guessed it, China. So then China is going to start to send troops in. They send about 200,000 troops. And then when those 200,000 troops come in, they push back the UN forces and push back the UN forces until they get back to that 38th parallel. Okay, so this was the 3, which is China sends help. And number 4, guess where both sides are at? Right back where they started. So what is it called, if you remember, when nobody's winning and nobody's losing? Stalemate. So technically what happens is they sign an armistice, which means an agreement to start fighting. Not to start fighting, to stop fighting. So technically the war is still on, and it could start up at any time. And every once in a while, if you watch the news, North Korea starts getting like a little powerful and starts flexing its muscles and starts threatening South Korea that they want to take them over. And then people get nervous. What's going to happen? Some people talk maybe they'll have a reunification. But what's going to happen, and you look at your notes that I'm posting, you'll see the lifestyle from the south to the north is very different. And if they were to unify, it would cost a tremendous amount of money. So much more money that we don't even know what would happen. So this is be a very tricky situation. But this is a little bit of kind of like the Cold War tensions, how it's playing out in our proxy war in Korea.